Coco is such an emotional movie, but when you look deeper into it, there are a lot of little things that make you wonder. Stay tuned for a theory that could change the whole meaning of the film. Are you new around here? Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to The Things for more great content like this. Now on to 10 Coco theories that will leave you shook.
No.
Evil people get remembered. If you haven't seen Coco, then we are sorry for all of the spoilers that we are about to throw your way. But seriously, what have you been doing all this time? Go watch the movie! If you have seen the movie, then you know the premise of the film. Basically, in the film, you can only exist in the afterlife as long as someone remembers you. So naturally, people only remain in the afterlife until their families pass away, and then they disappear. In theory, it makes sense. How long can one person really be remembered? Well, not long if you're a regular person, but this one theory had us super spooked. The only people that are remembered for centuries are famous people like Michael Jackson, George Washington, and Madonna. But there is also a flip side to that coin. History's worst people will also be remembered in the same way. People like Hitler, for instance, would be in the afterlife for the rest of eternity. It makes you think, if Coco got it right, then that means that by teaching the ugly parts of history, we would be helping to keep history's worst people in the afterlife. Isn't that awful to think about? Same universe as other films. Have you heard of the Pixar theory? It's the idea that all of Pixar's movies actually take place in the same universe. So instead of taking each movie for a singular story, you can see it as interwoven with the rest of the movies in the Pixar family. Coco fits perfectly into this ideal. In the film, people need their family members to remember them, or else they experience the final death and disappear forever. The same is true in Inside Out. When Riley forgets her imaginary friend, Bing Bong, he also fades away and disappears. In both films, the characters need someone to remember them to stay alive, so it makes sense that these stories would take place in the same universe. And memory isn't just important when it comes to staying alive, it's also very important in other ways. For instance, a big theme in The Incredibles is that Mr. Incredible doesn't want people to forget about him or all of the good that he has done. He's afraid that he will disappear from their memories. If all of these movies took place in the same universe, then it's safe to assume that these characters probably ran into each other at some point. Wouldn't that be insane? Hector and Ernesto. Spoiler alert! We are about to get into a major spoiler, so if you haven't seen the film, pause this video, go watch Coco, and come back. Okay, now that all those people are gone, we can tell you one of the theories that freaked us out the most. So you know how Miguel spends a lot of the movie looking for De La Cruz because he believes that he is his grandfather? It turns out that it is actually Hector who is his grandfather and not Ernesto. But one Redditor posted to the Fan Theories subreddit that they think that Ernesto and Hector might actually be the same person, just remembered in two different ways. Maybe the way that people are remembered actually creates different versions of them in the afterlife. One version of De La Cruz is the one who gave up a life of fame to go back to his family, while the other one is the one who stuck with his music career and gave up his family for fortune and fame. They are both Miguel's grandfather.
You were going to give me your blessing.
Simply two different versions. If this theory is true, then our minds are absolutely blown. It makes you have to rethink everything. The movie was supposed to be a musical. There sure is a lot of singing that goes on in the movie Coco. The singing actually plays an integral role in the film. The main song in the film, Remember Me, is actually how Miguel's grandfather ends up being able to stay in the afterlife for a bit longer. As we all know, Pixar doesn't do musicals. As long as the movie company has been around, they have never produced one musical. But because Coco had so many songs and dances, it made people wonder if Coco was originally intended to be Pixar's very first musical. According to director Lee Unkrich, the movie was supposed to be a breakout into song musical. If that had been the case, then it would have been Pixar's first venture into the musical world. No wonder the film was jam-packed with musical numbers. We wonder what made the producers pivot from their original idea. The only thing that could have made the movie better was if there had been even more tunes in it. What do you think was the reasoning behind the creators not turning the movie into a musical? Let us know in the comments.
Don't I know you?
Coco is connected to the Little Mermaid. Have you ever watched a movie and then thought about how similar it is to others that you have seen before? That's pretty natural. There are only so many stories that can be told, so So when we watched Coco, we couldn't help but notice a crazy resemblance to another movie. Know which one we are thinking of? The Little Mermaid. Think about it. Miguel is sort of the outcast of his family. He thinks about things that no one else does. He's obsessed with music, even though it's been banned by his family. Ariel is the same. She thinks about humans all the time and dreams of being a part of them. Both characters leave their families to go and follow their dreams, and the similarities don't stop there. Part of the film was actually modeled after The Little Mermaid. The team behind Coco gained inspiration for Miguel's secret attic by looking at Ariel's secret treasure room. They wanted to give him the perfect place to cultivate his musical talents and connect with his musical hero. Did you notice that it is similar to Ariel's? Was it giving you the Little Mermaid flashbacks? If it was, then you weren't crazy. The films actually are connected, so this theory checks out. Hector's appearance. Surprisingly, the afterlife is pretty flashy when you close your eyes and think of what the afterlife looks like. You're probably thinking that it is all doom and gloom. It's probably all dark and dreary in your mind. And when you watch the film, you see that it's actually quite bright and cheerful. And all of the people in it are decked out in lavish outfits. A lot of them look like they are living better in the afterlife than they probably did while they were living. Everyone except one person, and that's Hector. When you see Hector, he seems like a con artist, and that's partially because his clothes are tattered and he looks noticeably poorer than the rest of the people around him. Some people have theories as to why that is. Some people on Reddit believe that Hector's lack of funds had to do with how he was remembered. The people who are well remembered are on a lot of ofrendas, like Ernesto and Frida. They look amazing. They have nice clothes and still look attractive despite not being alive. Hector is only remembered by one person, and that person is losing her memory, which may be why he is so poorly dressed. Takes place after tragedy. The afterlife is a pretty big place. There is an assortment of different people walking around all the time. It actually kind of looks a lot like real life, right? These are families, old people, adults, and children alike. But when you really think about it, it actually becomes quite sad. Of course, there should be old people in the afterlife. Old people pass away all the time. But why are there so many children there? When you pass on, you seem to stay the same age that you were when you passed. So that means that all of these children passed away in their youth. One theory is that the movie is said to have taken place after some major tragedy. That would explain why so many young people were in the afterlife. Maybe it was a massive flood that took everyone out, or a plague of some sort. We'd have to look back at the history of Mexico to pinpoint exactly when this movie would take place. But either way, there was definitely something that was causing so many young people to pass. We don't like to think too long and hard about this theory because it's super sad. Let's move on to something happier.
He and Mama would sing such beautiful songs.
Only people in Mexico. The movie focuses on Mexico and the people that live there. But are we supposed to think that the afterlife is country-specific? Because it didn't seem like there were a lot of people from other places walking around the afterlife. That is weird in itself, but this theory even gets weirder. If we are supposed to think that there are people from other places in the afterlife, then they probably never get to cross over on the Day of the Dead. In order to cross over, you have to have a picture of someone's ofrenda. It's safe to say that only people who live in Mexico or are familiar with Mexican culture know about ofrendas or even celebrate the Day of the Dead. Everyone else would just have to watch as the others crossed back over and got to spend precious time with their family members. What's even worse is that they would have no way to tell their families to put up an ofrenda after they've passed. It's honestly really sad. There has to be some loophole that people from other countries can do to spend time with their families once a year. Otherwise, the afterlife would be pretty unfair. Hector's walk. Miguel spends a lot of time with Hector throughout the movie, so we get to see a lot of this character. Though we do see him a lot, you may or may not have noticed that for part of the movie, Hector walks with a pretty bad limp. There is a pretty interesting theory as to what his limp is all about. In one scene, Hector introduced Miguel to his friend Chicharron. Chicharron disappears from the afterlife because his family and everyone that he loved has forgotten about him. How does this connect to Hector's weird walk? Well, Hector really starts to walk like that after his friend dies. Some people believe that maybe Hector began using Chicharron's femur after he hurt his on one of his attempts to cross over into the real world and see his daughter. The reason that the femur didn't disappear with his friend is that it is now a part of Hector's body and not Chicharron's anymore. If you look closely, one of Hector's legs is shorter than his other leg, which would make perfect sense if this theory were true. Now we know that this is super far-fetched, which is why we aren't putting all of our eggs in this theory's basket, but it's pretty interesting to think about. Afterlife isn't real. This brings us right into what might be the craziest theory of them all. We are led to believe that the place that Hector and the rest of the older family members are in is the afterlife. Many of them are afraid of being forgotten because they don't want to leave the afterlife. All of them except one. Chichiron doesn't seem too sad to pass on. Instead, he sighs, as if he is finally finishing a long day. What if the afterlife that we saw in the movie is actually a state of limbo, and all of the people are chained there by memories of their families? Maybe most of them don't even know that they are in limbo, or maybe they know but would rather live in limbo if it means being able to go back and see their families once a year. That would also make Chichiron's reaction to moving on make a lot of sense. Maybe he wasn't so afraid to go on because he didn't have any family members left to visit in the real world anyway. This theory is super out there, but it's definitely something to think about. It changes the whole dynamic of the film. That's it for 10 Coco theories that will leave you shook. Were you surprised by anything on this list? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for watching.